of attitude. Now, it's easy to have a great attitude when things are going well, right? Anybody can do that. But what really matters is who we are when things go bad, when we find ourselves in a spot that we don't want to be in. That's when the rubber hits the road. And Paul, he knew about challenges, did he not? Now, it's widely believed that he came from wealth. A lot of people believe that he came from wealth, and it's possible that he had an easy life at the beginning until he met Jesus. Now, I'm not going to say that, following Jesus is going to wreck your life, but Jesus does change what's important in our lives. And Paul went full tilt into helping people find Jesus, and there were big challenges attached to that. And Paul lists out some of the hardships that he faced. The moment that he converted to Christianity and started on his mission for Jesus, he had people trying to kill him. One time he lists out some of the hardships he'd gone through in 2 Corinthians 11. He said this: he's been in prison. He was flogged 5 times. He was beaten with rods 3 times. He was stoned once. He was shipwrecked 3 times. Spent a night and a day in the open sea. Danger from rivers, from bandits, from fellow Jews, from Gentiles in the city, in the country, at sea, from false believers. He lacked sleep. He lacked hunger. He was thirsty. He was cold. He was naked. Like, how many of those in that list can you identify with? I mean, I've been tired. I've been hungry. I've been thirsty. I've been cold. I've been naked. Usually of my own choosing, though. We're in a series through Philippians. And as we said last week, that Paul was writing Philippians and he's holding up his chains. He's in prison. And he's in the very midst of struggle, right? But what we'll see here today is that Paul had a choice in how he responded to that struggle. Look in Philippians chapter 1. I want you to open your Bibles, Philippians chapter 1, and then I want you to look at verse 12. We're going to start in verse 12. So Philippians chapter 1, verse 12, it says this: "Now, I want you to know, brothers and sisters, that what has happened to me has actually served to advance the gospel. As a result, it has become clear throughout the whole palace guard and to everyone else that I am in chains for Christ." The first thing we got to remember is that we have a choice in how we respond to challenges. If you're a note taker, write that down. We have a choice in how we respond to challenges. When hardships happen in life, we naturally tend to focus what? Within, right? Our focus goes within and towards me, myself, and I. We go into protection modes. And that is one way to handle adversity. It is. It's not a good way, but it is a way. And we're going to get to that. We're going to see that in the Scriptures. But Paul shows us that there's another way, and it's a better way. To turn your focus outward and upward. In times of challenge, to turn your focus outward and upward. Now, I tell my kids this all the time, that you get to choose whether or not you're happy or sad, whether you're glad or mad. You get to choose that. I don't choose that for you, right? You're sitting here in this moment, and you're upset, but you don't have to be. You can choose differently. It's up to you, right? I tell my kids that all the time. Charlie's rolling her eyes right now. She hears that all the time. Now, nobody would want to be in Paul's situation. Not even Paul. He's not glad to be there, but he is glad. In adversity, Paul chooses mission over moaning. Choose to find purpose in the pain. He took the opportunity to make the most of every opportunity. Now, we might not like where we are. Paul doesn't like where he is. But I promise there are people who need you to be there. There are people around you right now that need you to help them take their next step with God. God doesn't waste circumstances. You might not appreciate where you are, but because you're there, someone should appreciate you being there. Maybe you're working in a department right now that you had hoped to be out of by now. It was indicated to you that you would be promoted, but there you still are. But you're working next to someone who is having problems at home. And God can use you to help them there. And only you can do that. Maybe you're living in a neighborhood that used to be full of great neighbors, but now it seems like it's different than what it used to be. But you're living a couple doors down from a couple who is just one well-placed invitation away from coming to church and connecting to God in a way that they've never connected before. And only you can do that. Maybe you've had to be at the hospital a lot lately because of you or a loved one's health. But now you're around a group of people that you would have never otherwise have had contact with, and you're getting to know each other. And your attitude in this situation is connecting with them, it's changing them, and it's inspiring them. And only you can do that. Paul did not want to be there. He didn't want to be in prison, but he was. Maybe you don't want to be in that job, but you are. Maybe you don't want to be in that house, but you are. Maybe you don't want to be in that office, but you are. We have to accept that and then discover the mission in it. And God's missions are always to do with people. Find the person that you can invest in. I promise you, wherever you are, if you're not happy with where you are, you can look around and you can see that somebody is around you right now that needs you. You don't want to stay there, and as soon as you can get out of there, you will. Trust me, it'll happen. But while you're there, look around and get your focus outward and upward. Find the mission for while you're there. Have you ever noticed that people tend to watch more intently when we go through times of trouble? Have you ever noticed that? You guys know who Coach Prime is, right? You've seen him. At Jackson State, he was getting attention. A lot of people were paying attention to him. But now that he's at Colorado, whole nother level, right, of attention. Everybody thought that it was going to be a cool story. You know, everybody saw that. It was great. He was getting media attention, and it was going well. But nobody thought that he was going to do very well. You know what I'm saying? Everybody thought he was going to get smoked in the Power Five. And then week 1 happens, and what happens? He beats TCU, a team that was in the national championship just last year. And everybody's like, whoa, what in the world? And so you thought he had attention before that. Everybody starts paying attention now. And then he goes on and he beats Nebraska. And then he beats Colorado State. And everybody, he had worldwide attention then. But then what happens? He gets drilled by Oregon. And I mean embarrassed at Oregon. And what happens? Did everybody just kind of leave him alone then? No, why? Because people pay attention in these times. When things go bad, when there's a car wreck, what do people do? They slow down so they can see it, right? We all do it. And everybody was paying attention. And what were they wanting to know? Everybody wanted to tune in to the post-game conference, to the press interview, and see what was he going to say? How was he going to respond, right? And so then, this week, everybody wanted to watch the game. How are they going to respond? And of course, if you're an OU fan, you were a huge Colorado fan this week, right? Because he was playing Lincoln Riley. Gosh. And they responded. They lost the game at the very end, but they came back and they got in trouble early, but they responded. It's inspiring, is it not? To see that kind of, when somebody gets beat down, but then you see them rise back. When you see them take the challenge and the attitude that they have is a positive attitude. It's inspiring and it's infectious. You don't know what you're made of until you're tested. And you can't know that you're the best until you've gone through the test. When you're in the deep end, people watch you. You already know that because we watch other people when they're going through their struggle. I was a youth pastor in California a long time ago. And I'll never forget, there was a mother who lost her 18-year-old son. Unimaginable heartache and pain right there. But I will never forget her response to it. She talked about how grateful she was for the time she had with her son. Man, a lot of people could get up there and say, God, why would you do that to me? Why would you rip that away? He was a good kid. He was, why? And a lot of us do that. But she chose to be grateful. And it was so shocking to me. It was so inspiring to me. It was so unexpected to me that I will never forget her for the rest of my life. And someday when I go through unimaginable pain, I can't help but think that her influence in my life will not creep back up into my mind. And she will influence. I don't even remember her name. And she doesn't know me. But yet she has an impact on me. And here I am on this stage talking about her all these years later. People notice because people are watching when we're going through it. You have an attentive audience watching and listening. And God might not be the reason that you are where you are, but God is going to use you where you are to speak to someone there. Whoever you're elbow to elbow with, use that relationship to lead them closer to Jesus. Now, Paul did it right, but not all of us do. There was a group that chose to do it differently. And look in Philippians chapter 1, verse 15 now. Verse 15 through 17. It says, "It is true that some preach Christ out of envy and rivalry, but others out of goodwill. The latter do so out of love, knowing that I am put here for the defense of the gospel. The former, they preach Christ out of selfish ambition, not sincerity, supposing that they can stir up trouble for me while I am in chains." There was a group of people who responded to this adversity by looking downward and inward, not outward and upward, right? They did the opposite. They chose selfishness and me first. And that's not unexpected because that's the natural and the easy thing to do when we're in stress. Paul used his adversity for God's glories, but these guys used adversity for their glory. Now, they had a beef with Paul. We don't know why. We're not exactly sure what their problem with Paul was. These are Christians. These are not false believers. These are absolutely Christians. They are in the church. They believed in Jesus. But they were upset with Paul. And they thought that when Paul was in prison, that if they went out to the streets and preached hard and caused trouble, that they would get him to get beat and get punished somehow. Now, Paul indicates here, by using the word supposing, that they were wrong, that it didn't work. But we must rise above the chaos by choosing to look outward and upward. We all have a choice. And when it hits the fan, what are we going to do? We're going to look inward and downward to me, myself. Or we're going to look around and who can I help in that situation? And this is key. When we take the focus off of ourselves, our life becomes so much better than just ourselves. And Paul had mastered this. Now I want you to look at Philippians 1:21. Look at 1:21 through 24. He says, "For to me, to live is what?" He said, "For me, to live is Christ." That's what his whole life is about. He says, "And to die is gain. If I'm going to go on living in the body, this will mean fruitful labor for me. Yet what shall I choose?" As if he had a choice. "I don't know. I'm torn between the two. I desire to depart and be with Christ, which is better by far. but it is more necessary for you that I remain in the body. Look, Paul, his whole life was about what? Jesus Christ. See, when the focus is on me and my comfort and my wants and my needs, it's really easy to be disappointed in things. But Paul's focus was on Jesus. 100% Jesus. He says, for me to live is Christ. And what that means is that the very foundation, the center, the purpose, and the meaning of Paul's life is Jesus. His whole life was wrapped up in Jesus. And so if his whole life is about Jesus, then dying, what would that be? That would be to him a gain, because he's finally going to be with the one that his whole life is about. A few years ago, when my youngest son, Major, was real little, maybe like 4 years old, he overheard me talking about this concept, and I was talking about how I look forward to the day that I die. You know, it's going to be the best day of my whole entire life, that I get to be with the one that I've longed to be with. And I look forward to that. Well, he didn't quite understand that, and so he went around and was telling people that he wanted to die. It was kind of concerning to people that didn't understand what the context of that was, and I was afraid I was going to get called by Child Protective Services. It's interesting to see that dying was not the sacrifice for Paul. That was not what the sacrifice was. In verse 23, he said, I'm torn between the two. I desire to depart and to be with Christ, which is better by far. But it is more necessary for you that I remain in the body. Dying was not the real sacrifice. It was staying alive to serve others. That was the sacrifice. So what does all this mean for us? Number one, when you're in a bad position, find your mission. When you're in a bad position, find your mission. God never wastes pain. We all want to have purpose in our lives. Well, congratulations. God has a purpose for your life right now. And I can almost guarantee that it involves two people. Number one is you. That God is working in you to mature and strengthen and grow you. And He's also going to work on someone else. That God is working through you to encourage and grow and challenge someone else through you in your circumstance. As hard as it might be, as tough as it might be, He's going to use you to work on someone else. When you're in a bad position, find your mission. And number two is be a carrier of a contagious attitude. Attitude is everything. Not only will it change you, it changes others around you. Life is 10% what happens to you and 90% of how you react to it. And it doesn't take much, just a spark for your attitude to change someone else's whole perspective. If they can deal with their problems, they'll say, I can deal with mine. Or better yet, they'll wonder where you get the strength to handle such adversity, which of course is Jesus. I want to look in verse 14. In verse 14 it says, and because of my chains, it's almost as if he holds these chains up. And because of my chains, most of the brothers and sisters have become confident in the Lord and dare all the more to proclaim the gospel without fear. You thought it would have the opposite effect, that he was in chains and so they would get scared. But no, his reaction to the chains emboldened them. It gave them confidence that they could go out and do the same. I'll never forget that lady who lost her son and how she responded to that. And someday when I go through that tragedy, I hope that I can have the same perspective. Consider Jesus, who even while nailed to the cross was able to see outside of himself and ask the Father to forgive the very people that were putting him up there, saying that they did not know what they were doing. That kind of perspective and attitude, it changes things. How you respond to your challenges can not only change your life, but someone else's life too. Let me pray.